Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so very much for joining us today with Speak Up and Empower with Real Talk Travel. We're so excited that you could join us. Might be a little cool outside, and we're going to go kind of on a unique adventure today, but that's okay. We can be warmed up by being in the movement of this adventure. And we have a special guest with us today, but just to give you a little bit of information, Speak Up and Empower is an online membership-based community with heart-centered people who really envision something better for the world and got something very important to share. And I'm with Real Talk Travel, and our adventure is waiting, and we have Kristin for Hurtigruten. She'll probably correct me on the proper pronunciation of that. But welcome, Christy, today to talk about our wonderful adventure that's awaiting us. So where are we going today, Kristin?
Thank you so much, Susan. I'm going to take you to a few different places and let you know where it is in the world that we sail via expedition cruising with Hurtigruten. And it's just such a pleasure to be here. It's such a pleasure to be able to, speak with potential future guests that may enjoy some small ship adventure in the future. So my name is Kristin. I am the sales director in Canada for this fantastic product. And I'm going to take you through a little bit about who we are, because I know some people may not have heard of us before. And part of that is to go over a little bit of our history, because if you can actually believe it, we are over 127 years old. We started back as a company in 1893 with our first captain, Richard With, and our first ship, the DS Vesteralen. So we started as a steamship route running along the coast of Norway. And we were actually servicing the local Norwegians with mail because, unfortunately, especially for the small communities that lived above the Arctic Circle, there was very infrequent mail service, especially in wintertime because, waters can be quite treacherous. There were very few lighthouses above the Arctic Circle. So they were getting their mail every 3 to 4 months, which was just, awful at that time. Mm-hmm. So we created the route along the Norwegian coast to give them a more frequent service. So we actually started the route between Trondheim and Hammerfest, and then we expanded the route to run between Bergen and Kirkenes. And we did that route just in 7 days' time. And just a little tidbit factoid for you, the Norwegian coast is the second longest coastline in the world, and it's second only to Canada. So you can imagine just how long this coastline actually is. And what's amazing is that we sailed the entire coast just in that 7-day time frame. And that's actually where our name comes from. So Hurtig means fast or express, and Ruten means route. So we are the fast route along the Norwegian coast. And kind of cool. It's a neat little history, and we really are an artery for the locals that live along the Norwegian coast. And even during everything that's been going on, we have still been sailing in Norway because we are an essential service to the people of Norway. So it is still a route that we operate today, and we've expanded, to deliver supplies to the coastal communities. We operate as a ferry service locally as well. And of course, we have this whole other arm to our company, which is expedition cruising. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So why expedition cruising? What is it all about? Especially for those, if you're more familiar with the big ship cruising, what makes expedition cruising different, special? And I think first and foremost, it's all about sailing on small ships. And we have to keep the ships small because the destinations, a lot of the times where we, go to the ends of the earth, the polar regions, dictate that we can only have a certain capacity size in order to, make landfall in a place like Antarctica, for example. So we can only have a maximum of 500 passengers on a ship if you actually want to be able to step foot on land when down in Antarctica. And when we're up in somewhere like Svalbard, for example, in order to be able to do a full circumnavigation of the island, we have to keep our ships at a passenger capacity of 200 passengers. So depending where we are sailing in the world, we may have these types of restrictions, which is why it's so important to keep the ship small so that we can actually get our guests on land and go further inland and do some exploring, whether it's, hiking like these guests are doing, or going to visit maybe a local penguin colony to observe some of the local landscape, the wildlife, maybe visit some local communities as well. So that's the beauty of small ship as well, small groups and being able to get to these intimate, remote, off the beaten path destinations because you're in a small ship. The way we operate, we are very much inspired by the spirit of exploration. So we tie a lot of our stories and our lectures back to, famed explorers of the past. If you look at somebody like Roald Amundsen, for example, he's a famed Norwegian polar explorer. He was actually the first to make it down to the South Pole, the first to find the transit all the way through the Northwest Passage, which is Arctic Canada. And he was the first to have been documented to have made it to the North Pole with his airship. So aptly so, we named one of our newest ships the MS Roald Amundsen to commemorate and highlight, these amazing adventures that he had as an explorer. And a lot of these, landing sites and stories and lectures weave their way into the expedition experience.
Well, it certainly makes sense to do that, right? To make that recognition for his forging through all those interesting spots too.
Exactly, especially the Northwest Passage, because there are so many unfortunately failed attempts that we might be more familiar with from the past, like Sir John Franklin, for example. Expedition cruising is also about getting off the beaten path, going to these remote destinations and, really staying away from any of the major ports and cities and that type of thing. And I love this photo because I think it perfectly captures what the heart of expedition cruising really is all about. You don't see any cities here. You don't even see a dock here. It is about just getting to enjoy Mother Nature as she intended, and it's as it's naturally, as it naturally exists in its existing form. It's just such an amazing way to see our planet in so many places. Where humans don't touch, which is pretty fantastic. And when we do go to places that might be more familiar from a large ship territory, I'll let you know how we differ in that way once we get to the destinations that we cover.
I like that picture because it's so serene.
Exactly. I think what you come to love and appreciate with visiting these parts of the world is just that sense of calm and that sense of peace, and it's just so quiet everywhere. It's unbelievable. And expedition cruising really is about the educational focus. So unlike the large ship experience where you might have more of the Broadway shows, casinos, game nights, that type of thing, we make our experience on board and ashore very educational. We want our guests to come back from this experience as ambassadors of the destination that we just visited. So we like to say that our ship is almost like an extension of the destination. It's not there to take away from where we're traveling, especially when you're in amazing places like the polar regions. So we have things like a science center on board. We do citizen science programs. We run a lecture series with our expert expedition team, really to bring in destination themes and stories to help you better understand where we're traveling and what we're seeing.
What would be the age group that you sail from? Is there a particular age?
The funny thing is we don't have a set age group, we see anywhere from sort of late 30s into even late 70s, early 80s. And it can even vary by destination, what the age group might look like. The only area that has a restriction for age is Antarctica. You do have to be minimum 5 years of age or older in order to visit there. That's the only destination that comes with an actual restriction. But otherwise, we see such a broad range of guests coming from all age groups, because I think nowadays too, and especially, with such a long time without traveling, we're all looking for that next opportunity to tick off that bucket list, to do that, amazing trip to, and it might be that once in a lifetime thing. Like for myself, I last year was able to tick off my 7th continent with Hurtigruten going down to Antarctica. And awesome. You may not think of me as the typical demographic, but these are the types of trips that we have for all ages and all capabilities as well, to be able to enjoy.
That's awesome.
And I think most importantly, when you go into an expedition cruise, is to know that the schedule remains flexible, and you have to keep an open mind about that. We're used to seeing cruise itineraries in advance, where you know that like day 1, we're going to be at this port from this time to this time. And day 2, we're going to be in port from this time to this time. And we don't actually give you that schedule in advance. We do a pre-briefing the night before the following day when you're on board, to tell you what the scheduled plan is. But then sometimes by the time we wake up the next day, maybe a different wildlife opportunity has presented itself. So we change our plan from plan A to plan B. Or perhaps maybe Mother Nature has stepped in and maybe changed the conditions. So maybe it's no longer safe to go and do plan A. So we switch up the plan and go to plan B or even plan C. So it's always about taking advantage of the opportunity and making sure that we're getting the best experience with what we have available to us on that day. And the funny thing is, I remember being down in Antarctica, and I remember having the plan B day and coming back on board and thinking, oh my gosh, how could we possibly have topped that day? It was just this perfect mix of, our ship was like nicely shielded by these amazing snow-capped mountains. And then there was glaciers and icebergs and so much ice in the water. And we had seals and penguins on shore. There were a couple abandoned research stations. It's like everything aligned so perfectly. And that was plan B. And so it's just to, let you know that plan B doesn't mean it's going to be a worse plan. It means that it's going to be the best plan for that day, given the circumstances. Because, of course, especially in polar regions, Mother Nature's very much in control there. So we always make sure we work with her. You never work against her.
No.
So.
No, we want to keep safe, and that's the key, right?
Exactly. Safety is number one when it comes to expedition cruising. And that's why it's so important, to keep that flexible scheduling. And I think it's part of the beauty of expedition is, no expedition will ever be the same. You could go back to the same destination, year after year and have a completely different experience, which I just love about expeditions.
Mm-hmm.
So why do expedition cruising with us at Hurtigruten? As you heard me say, we're over 127 years old, and that really is expertise that only comes with experience. We actually started our first expedition to Arctic Norway, which is Svalbard, only 3 years later in 1896. It's a very different environment, especially sailing in the polar regions. So you do want to pick an operator that has the experience being in these parts of the world. We also pride ourselves on being industry leaders in sustainability. Some of the things that we've done as a company, like this beauty that you see in front of you, we released the world's first hybrid electric powered ships in 2019. That was the MS Roald Amundsen. And then in 2020, her sister ship, the MS Fridtjof Nansen. We also, with our existing fleet, are in the process of converting them over to a biofuel, which, if you can believe it, is actually made out of organic waste and dead fish. So we're actually fueling the ships with nature. So again, just another one of the things we look at in terms of a sustainability aspect is changing, how we fuel these ships. We were also the first major cruise line and major travel company to ban single-use plastics across our entire fleet. We did that back in 2018. And we also give our guests the opportunity to participate in our sustainable initiatives. So we offer a Green Stay program on board. So our guests can choose to opt out of having their room serviced for as many days as they wish. And for each day that you choose not to have your room serviced, we actually make a donation on your behalf to the Hurtigruten Foundation. And the Hurtigruten Foundation is there to work with global and local initiatives for sustainability. And also protecting things like, our polar regions, Arctic wildlife like the polar bear, for example. So you're doing your part as a guest as well. And we also do things like beach clean initiatives, because if you can believe it, even in uninhabited places, like a lot of the island of Spitsbergen, which is one of the main islands of Svalbard, although many of the places, you won't find any humans, it's amazing how much garbage you will actually find that has washed in from the ocean and up onto the shores.
The currents, from the water.
Exactly. And especially like fishing industry waste. We find a lot of fishing nets and buoys and all of that sort of stuff. So we go ashore with our guests and dedicate some time to cleaning up the area that we're visiting, bring all of that garbage back on board our ship so that we can properly dispose of it when we get back at the end of the cruise. So we like to bring these opportunities of inviting our guests to be a part of our sustainable initiative. And I do really think that people are looking for a way, to travel a little bit more green and to have that opportunity to contribute while they're away as well.
I think that's fantastic, because then they feel a part of it, right? That
Exactly.
sense of accomplishment that they've had while they were on this wonderful expedition.
Well, exactly. It's just something that, enhances something even further. You're already going to get an amazing experience, but you're going to feel good about it as well when you go. We have what we like to call your comfortable base camp at sea. So, okay, it might be, a little bit more comforts of home than, say, a base camp if you're going to trek Everest, for example. But we're a very comfortable, casual atmosphere. Yes, we are a premium product, but we don't have any type of, formal dress codes or butlers on board or champagne and strawberries in our Zodiacs. That's not what we're about. You'll find, of course, we're a Norwegian company, so we have a beautiful, modern Scandinavian design. So light colored woods, warm, woolly blankets on your beds. Of course, you have to have a sauna, because you can't be a Norwegian company without a sauna. So the idea is, go out and have your exploration, enjoy the landscapes, the wildlife, the cold in a lot of the places that we visit, but then come back on board your cozy atmosphere, throw on your robe and go sit in the hot tub, or, maybe go to the wellness center on one of our newer ships and have a massage, that type of thing. And we also have a lot of interactive education, which I'll get into a little bit more as we progress. And in my opinion, incredible cuisine. You will never go hungry on an expedition cruise, that's for sure. And what's neat is you will get some Norwegian flair with our food, but also we have a lot of international delicacies that we serve on board as well. And what I personally love is none of our food is industrially processed. It is all made from scratch on board. So right down to, the baguettes that you would have, in the morning or lunchtime, everything is made fresh on board. And the milkshakes, oh my gosh, don't even get me started on the milkshakes at free time.
Have to put in some extra hiking after the milk.
Exactly. But again, I think it just adds that extra level of really personalized service. And of course, we can work with dietary restrictions on board, because it's very simple to set up a meeting with our, food and beverage manager to walk that through with anything that you might have an allergy to or anything like that. And of course, we do give you, a very value-packed experience. It is somewhat of an all-inclusive experience, and I'll share with you the details of what does come included with your Hurtigruten expedition. So first and foremost, and I think really the stars of the show, is the expertise of our expedition team. They really are the heart and soul of what expedition cruising is all about. So they are your hosts on board. They take care of you when we are doing our landings. And they are also there sometimes to go ashore with us and do, hiking or go out kayaking with us. So they really are what it's all about in terms of, the education and the activity side of your expedition. So we work with an international team. Actually, our chief naturalist for Hurtigruten is a Canadian, I'm proud to say. And these are educated professionals in things like geology, marine biology, ornithology, history, photography. So they all bring a certain expertise, and knowledge to the table to help tie, their, career into what you're experiencing. Like an ornithologist, for example, that's a person you want to have on board with you when you are in places like Antarctica, to tell you all about the different types of penguins we might see, or the albatross, or the giant petrels, or the skuas, and they really highlight all of the different types of bird life that we might see. And so you can see why these specialists are so great to have on board, to be able to also do things like on-deck guiding. So when we are doing some scenic cruising, maybe we're in Iceland and we're near some bird cliffs, our expedition team is there to help us identify the types of birds that might be even just hovering around or near the ship as well. And of course, they come highly trained in polar survival. They have to renew their polar skills with us before they embark on any Arctic or Antarctic season. But I think what I love, especially about the photo in the top left, is the true dedication that our expedition team brings to the table. This is literally one of our expedition team members waist deep in polar ice cold water, bringing our Zodiacs in and out from the landing site, making sure it's safe. And they could very well do that for, 6 to 8 hours of the day with their team members. And I just think that really drives it home how much they're, there to just make sure our guests are having a safe and memorable experience.
That's nice. Mm-hmm.
So the food, we were talking about food. Oh my gosh, the food, like just looking at the photos, it makes me hungry. But
they look like very top notch, like you said, 5+.
And that's the thing, you might not normally expect that from expedition cruising, but there's certain things, that we want to make sure that we have top quality, especially when it comes to food. So we like to say expedition takes priority over meal times. We talked about how Mother Nature and conditions can always change. So things like landings and scenic cruisings will take priority over when we schedule our meals, because of course we want to take advantage of the best conditions that we have when we have them. So sometimes day to day, your meal times will change to fluctuate and move with the expedition operations. But of course, you're going to get all of your breakfast, lunch, and dinner in some way throughout the day. We also give an early riser and a late afternoon treat as well. And if we do get those beautiful sunny days, especially if our ship is scenic cruising, through some ice, our hotel manager loves to surprise our guests and do an open deck barbecue, under the nice shining sky, to have a nice hot dog and maybe grab a beer from the bar. It really is kind of a nice personal and feels like home. Like it's like having your own backyard barbecue on a beautiful ship in the middle of Antarctica. I mean, I don't think I could find anything more suiting, especially for us as Canadians as well.
That's awesome. Making me hungry now. I got to.
Don't worry, I'll move on from the slide shortly. So coffee, tea, water included and always available. And then we do also offer house wine, beer, pop, and mineral water in the restaurants at lunch and dinner. Gratuities are not expected on board, so you won't have that daily per day amount or any prepaid amount that you need to, have charged in advance. It's not the Norwegian way of life to tip, so we pass that concept onto our ships as well. Mm-hmm. So some of the activities and things that you might participate in while you're on board one of our ships, first and foremost is our lecture series. So this is, of course, hosted by our expedition team. And they will, of course, schedule these things in and around our landings and our ice cruising opportunities so that you're not having to choose between one or the other. And they could be lectures around, climate change and sustainability. And I think what's important too is so many of our expedition team members are in these parts of the world, season after season, year after year with us. And I remember being up in Svalbard, and I think we were in Kingsfjord, and there was a glacier that came down the mountain. And the expedition team member that I was with actually said, just a couple years ago, that glacier was actually, say, much further out than it is now 2 years later. It had receded so much in just a short period of time. So they're seeing the physical effects of climate change in these parts of the world. And this is the type of information they share with our guests on board. And of course, they will share their specialty about, the wildlife that we might see, the landscapes, how the ice interacts, volcanoes, that type of thing. And of course, tie it all into the destination that we're specifically visiting. We also have fantastic science centers on board our ships, as you can see here with one of our expedition team members. We've got geological and biological microscopes on board and different samples of things that we can view. And we also participate in citizen science programs. So our guests can actually aid in research. So one of my favorite programs that we partner with is Happy Whale. And what's neat about Happy Whale is if you take a picture of a whale tail, which is sort of their version of our fingerprints, that's their identifying marker,
right.
We can submit your photo to Happy Whale, and they will actually be able to tell us, just based on your photo, if that whale already exists in their database. And if it does, they can tell us, of course, the type of whale, the gender of the whale, approximate age of the whale, its migratory pattern. Does it travel with, known family members? Has it been spotted with in the past? And what's even more neat is if Happy Whale doesn't have your whale in their database, you get to actually name that whale, and then it will forever live on in the Happy Whale database with the name that you gave it. So it's just one of the ways that we get to contribute to science and research, while on board your expedition.
How exciting that is, right?
Kind of neat, eh? I'm like dying now to be able to find a whale that is not in the database. We do also have a professional photographer on board each one of our expedition ships, and they will offer introductory photo lectures. Because, of course, we're lucky to travel to some of the most beautiful destinations in the world, and with so many unique wildlife experiences that, of course, we all want to be able to make sure that we're capturing this so we can, look back on these memories. So they will be there to help you work with your own camera equipment as well. Make sure you're using the right lenses and angles to capture what's around you. And they also capture your voyage as well. So they will, film and take photos of the entire voyage, and then they offer them available for optional purchase at the end on a USB. And we do also include free Wi-Fi on board. So if you still just want to make sure you're connecting with friends and family back home, or maybe making them jealous by sending them, photos and things like that, we do have Wi-Fi. Just keeping in mind, sometimes we do get, quite remote where we don't have a signal. So sometimes we do lose the connection. I'm not going to lie. I remember last summer, We traveled actually above 80 degrees north, and we did lose internet for a couple days. And it was the most freeing couple days of my life, not having, a device constantly in front of your face. So
Yes.
I always say it's not a bad thing if you happen to lose Wi-Fi
The
signal.
Yeah, the expedition to disconnect in the best way.
Exactly. These are once in a lifetime trips. You don't want to miss them by, being stuck behind a device. That's for sure.
Exactly.
So one of the other ways that our guests can, contribute to science and be more a part of the destination is if you want to participate in our science boat. So this is totally voluntary. You can sign up for it at the beginning of the voyage, and then we break everybody up into smaller boat groups throughout, and then we will make a schedule throughout the trip. So when your boat is ready to go out, you go out with a small group with a couple of our expedition team members, and you might be collecting water samples or maybe checking the water temperature. This expedition team member on the left here is actually collecting phytoplankton samples, and these are things we can actually take back to the ship and look at them under our biological microscopes. And what's interesting too is when we do sometimes collect the water samples and look at them under the microscope, seeing how much microplastic is in them, even in some of the most remote waters of the world, how much these microplastics really do exist almost everywhere, which is unfortunate. But it really ties in why, we are trying to be as sustainable as we possibly can when we do these types of trips.
And us playing a part to help in cleaning that up, fantastic.
Exactly. So of course, there's a certain amount of gear that you're going to need when doing an expedition. So we provide everybody with the Helly Hansen Hurtigruten expedition jacket. This is a wind and water resistant layer to just throw on top of, your own clothes. And it's great for, especially when we're out in our Zodiacs, taking you to and from shore to help block the wind and any of the water spray, or if we're out doing some of our scenic cruising in these boats as well. And we size you for the jackets once you're on board to make sure that it fits around, any of your own layers underneath. We also provide our Hurtigruten muck boots. So especially in places like the polar regions where we have certain regulations to follow, we give you the proper footwear that's needed. So these are very thick, rubber treaded boots that will help you get through any of the elements of ice, snow, cold water, mud, that type of thing. And again, one less thing you have to worry about packing.
I was going to say, we wouldn't have to worry about filling up a suitcase with our boots.
Exactly, because we all know airline baggage limits are not getting any larger these days. So this is one less thing you need to worry about. We do also give our guests the loan of our trekking poles. So we might be doing a landing that is slippery or might be a bit rocky. So our expedition team brings the poles ashore, and you can just grab a couple for yourself to go off on the exploration of the landing site. And the Hurtigruten reusable water bottle is also something that everybody receives on board. So that and your Hurtigruten expedition jacket are also souvenirs to take home with you at the end of the trip as well. And we do have water refill stations set up around the ship so that you can just refill your water bottle whenever you need.
Awesome. Mm-hmm.
And of course, the boats that you see above, you might know them as Zodiacs. We like to spruce it up, call them our explorer boats. So we use these as our tenders to get our guests to and from shore. And we also use these to go out and do some exploring as well. So people are always curious to know, like, how difficult is it to get in and out of the boats? And the beauty thing is the design of the Hurtigruten ships is quite cool. So the side hull of our ship actually folds out flat and is water level with our boat. So you're not worrying about teetering down, a steep set of stairs and then trying to get into the boat. Our boats pull right up water level. And of course, we have staff members on the platform and in the boat to help get you in and out as well. And this is just kind of another view of what the platform looks like. And it's all about the sailor's grip. That's kind of the best method for getting in and out. So part of the included experience for expedition is doing things like landings and ice or scenic cruising. So a landing, you're probably thinking, okay, I've heard you use the term. What does it mean? And it's not overly that technical. We are literally pulling our explorer boats up to land, so up to the natural setting of the landscape, and going ashore to explore. So we're not using a port or any major dock facility or anything like that. We are just pulling up to land and going off and maybe seeking out some penguins or something. And then there is another aspect to it, which is the ice or scenic cruising side of it, where we go out in the explorer boats and it might be going around some icebergs like you can see in this top photo here, or maybe there are some whales nearby, so we can kind of sit in our boats and see if they maybe want to come up and interact in and around our boats. So that's part of another major aspect of how expedition cruising is quite different, is really getting up close and getting water level with so many different types of experiences. So when we do landings, there are different types depending on the conditions of where we are in the world. So sometimes we do get a dry landing, and this might be because we are visiting a research station, or maybe it is a small local community that might have a small pier or dock set out for us. So this particular photo in the bottom left, this was actually a landing that we did at a Ukrainian research station in Antarctica called Vernadsky. So we were able to use their facilities to get our guests in and out. And kind of little sidebar story about them, Vernadsky actually is the southernmost bar in the world. They make their own vodka. So what's kind of cool is you can go in and, I think it was €5 or something like that to buy a shot of their homemade vodka. So you can say you had a drink in the southernmost bar in the world. Kind of a neat thing to do. And I figure it's like, while you're there, you might as well, right?
Take advantage of the experience. Immerse yourself with the culture and the people, right? Yeah.
Exactly. We might also encounter a wet landing or beach landing. And this is where we are, pulling the boats up right from the ocean, right from, the water. And our guests do actually step in and out of the boat through the water. So you can see why the boots become very handy, because yes, you could actually be standing in, a foot or two of polar water to get in and out of the explorer boats. And then there is a polar landing. So this is obviously more common, up in the Arctic or down in Antarctica at the beginning of the season, especially when there is still a lot of ice and snow. So our expedition team might actually go ashore first and shovel out an area for our guests to be able to disembark safely from the explorer boat. So you can see from this photo, there is a shovel actually stuck in the snow.
Yes.
And they had to dig out kind of a snow staircase to be able to disembark our guests. And what's kind of funny is when we are in places like Antarctica, if there is a penguin colony around, after we start to leave the landing site for the day, you can start to see the penguins now use the set of stairs to get themselves in and out of the water. So they're quite resourceful and they're very curious of us. They're not scared of us. So it is quite funny when you start to see them use, the little pathways that we have created.
They're saying, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's a little easier now.
Yes.
So another amazing part is getting out and being, at one with the ice very close to you and being that close to the water, especially too when you can get up close to the icebergs and see, the different colors that the ice really has, especially all the different colors of kind of blues and greens. And sometimes we can see, seals that are just lazing out on the icebergs, having a little afternoon nap in the sun. But again, it really is, everybody always, you assume for cruising, it's all about getting ashore outdoor and exploring on land, but this really is a whole other part that makes expedition cruising so special and so unique, is this, immersive water level experience of what's around you. And of course, we're not always in places where there's ice, but we still do take the opportunity to get out in the Explorer boats and do some scenic cruising. So this photo, for example, was taken when we were going through the Northwest Passage, and this area very aptly named Smoking Hills. So we got our guests out to explore in the boats and have a closer look at the cliffs and that area. So there's always opportunity, whether there's ice or not, to be able to get out and explore and really experience that destination from a different viewpoint.
Is that hot springs?
It's not actually. Funny enough, I don't know the history of Smoking Hills. There must be some sort of thermal activity or something in the rocks. There you go. A little something I can look into.
I'm going to look that up myself.
Yeah. So again, it's just like, let's get closer and let's see what it's all about. And that's, just something that naturally occurs here. And us as guests are one of the few to actually view and experience something like this.
Great picture. Mm.
And then for the places where we might actually have a port or a dock, like Norway, for example, we like to go out and have an included excursion or activity per port. So it might be like this photo, for example, where our expedition team has actually taken our guests for a hike up into the mountains to get a beautiful view for that day. Or maybe it's taking a bus tour up to the North Cape Monument to view the northernmost part of Europe, which is at 71 degrees north. So even if we are in areas where there might be a city, we still have something included for you that day to do. If we are in a place where there are, local tours that we can take advantage of as well, we do offer those on an optional basis. But we want to make sure that at least with every place that we're visiting, there's always something included for you to do that day.
That's good. Mm-hmm.
So where in the world do we actually explore? Of course, we do cover the polar regions, but we do cover the spots in between as well. So of course, starting in Norway, we always say if you're going to go to Norway, you might as well sail with the Norwegians. We actually sail in Norway all year round, and you can have a different experience no matter what time of year you go. Because of course, the beauty of going in the wintertime is the hopeful opportunity to view this very thing that you're seeing, the Northern Lights. And we spend over half of the voyage above the Arctic Circle. So this greatly enhances the opportunity to see something like the Northern Lights. And you can also see why the expedition team photographer becomes very handy in this type of experience, because they say there's only certain lens types or different views that you're able to actually capture with a camera, the Northern Lights. So they're there to help you with that type of thing as well. Or maybe in the summertime, you're looking to do some scenic cruising through the beautiful fjords that Norway has to offer. So in the summertime, especially, the opposite effect is experiencing the midnight sun, which can be, throw your senses off a little bit. I had the opportunity to do it last summer myself, or I should say 2019 summer. And, to still have the sun up at 3:00 in the morning and trying to go to sleep was like, okay, try to go to sleep, try and close your eyes. It's nighttime, you need to sleep. But again, it does make sometimes for the opportunity to be able to go out and do some evening landings or evening activities as well, which is kind of cool. So we also do some expedition cruising in the British and Scottish Isles. And what you might be used to from a large ship experience of visiting the larger cities like Stockholm, or maybe going into Dublin or Glasgow, we actually stick more to either the less inhabited or uninhabited parts of the British and Scottish Isles. And it might be to go and see an abandoned castle ruin, or maybe it's chance to go to an island that we know has a very prominent bird colony that lives there. So it's like a whole other type of experience, seeing these parts of the world that we might only think of from a big ship perspective, but knowing you can have a completely different rugged adventure type experience in these off the beaten paths destinations of what is normally seen or considered more as a big city destination. So really cool opportunities here to get a different viewpoint of these parts of the world.
Posted some on my social media about the British Isles, like the
fantastic.
And the island of Arran and the red deer that was by the distillery. It was interesting. They're close to the distillery.
Awesome. So if you're searching out for the hopeful sighting of a polar bear, Svalbard is a perfect spot to start for that. Now, Svalbard is Arctic Norway. It is a separate archipelago from mainland Norway. And there is one major island called Spitsbergen, and that's where we start and end our Svalbard expeditions. And we do actually include a charter flight from Oslo to get you to Longyearbyen, because there's really not frequent airfare available to this part of the world. So this goes for anywhere where our expeditions start in a very remote part of the world. We will provide a charter flight to get you to and from our ship. So we do the same for Antarctica, for example. In Ushuaia or Punta Arenas, we include charter flights from larger cities to make sure that our guests all get to our ship on time and together. But when you are up in Svalbard, at the beginning of the season, we tend to focus on sort of the Northwest National Park area. And as the season goes on in the summertime and the ice starts to melt, we do make attempts to do a full circumnavigation of the island of Spitsbergen. And we always say attempt and try when it comes to expedition, because of course we have to rely completely on the conditions, both weather-wise and ice-wise, as to whether or not we're able to actually do it. But we always promise it will be an adventure, it will be exciting, it will be memorable, and that's really what's important here. But we'll never guarantee the sighting of polar bears, but my gosh, is it ever an exciting thing if you do come across one in Svalbard. Of course, we stay very, very well away from them. If they are ashore and we were meant to do a landing at that site that day, we of course won't do a landing at that site. It's their home. We are not going to disturb that. But quite often, it might be that the polar bear experience actually happens while they're maybe walking around along the coastline, or maybe they're going around in the ice trying to hunt for seals, and we are viewing them from the ship. So there can be different ways to experience the wildlife. It's not always going to happen on land, and especially if there's polar bears involved. But there could be Arctic fox on land, or the Arctic reindeer that we might experience. But again, I figure if you have a love for the polar regions, and if you've been to Antarctica, you really need to make it up to Svalbard, to experience the other end of things. It really is quite an experience. Now, we do also go to Iceland, and why this is neat from an expedition standpoint is we actually do a full circumnavigation of the island. So you get such a different vantage point of, the island from sea, but we also, of course, do some onshore exploration as well. So you kind of get to see both sides of it, which is great. And of course, Iceland can be a bit more of an expensive destination to visit. So there's a lot of value in expedition cruising because, of course, your accommodations, your meals, and some of your onshore exploration is already included in your expedition price. But what you may not have known is Iceland is still technically considered part of the Arctic. And we do a landing on an island called Grimsey. And Grimsey is a separate island north of Iceland, but it still belongs to Iceland. And there is actually a monument right in the middle of the island of Grimsey, which is where the Arctic Circle crosses. So even on an Iceland expedition, you could technically cross on both sides of the Arctic Circle. when you're doing a trip to Iceland. I mean, who knew that you'd be able to say you've been to the Arctic by doing an expedition cruise?
That would make a perfect picture.
Exactly. So we do also visit Greenland, and there's two very different experiences with Greenland. You could have the West Coast expedition cruise, which is, you see these beautiful little colored houses here. We do visit a lot of the Inuit community. So 80% of Greenland is covered in ice, and the 20% that isn't is primarily that West Coast and where all of those communities have, set up their homes and their towns. So we love being in Western Greenland. We have such a great relationship with a lot of these local communities. When we are in port, I should say, it is still considered port, some of these communities. We love to interact with the locals, and they are so happy to share with our guests their way of life and how they live and survive, especially with the climates that they receive, especially in winter time. And we also like to invite the elders and maybe sometimes the school children on board our ship so that they get to know us as well, so that we can foster this mutual relationship and continue to, work together so that we can keep bringing back guests in the future. We're all about, supporting the local communities, and we do this as well through the Hurtigruten Foundation. We don't love the idea of over-tourism in these areas and, unleashing thousands of people into a small community that just isn't, built to sustain that many people. So we are all about working with the communities and sharing our lives with each other, again, to foster future relationships and visits. One of the things I love when we visit a community called Itilik in southern Greenland is the whole community comes out and we play a soccer game against. So passengers from our ship and our crew play soccer against the town, and 9 times out of the 10, the town wins the soccer game. So we think in between our visits, they're out there practicing to make sure that they're winning. We also do visits on Eastern Greenland, and Eastern Greenland is completely different because it is very much, rugged, lots of ice, weather conditions that are more difficult to sail in. And there's only actually one community that lives or is located in Eastern Greenland, and that is Itakatoormiit. And actually 9 months of the year, they are almost landlocked to where they live, because there is so much ice that they can't actually get out in their boats, to leave the town. So if you are hoping for polar bears in the Greenland area, Eastern Greenland is the better type of experience to go for. And again, think more of the rugged adventure and the barren landscapes, and less community focused, more landscape, wilderness, weather condition focused. So 2 very different types of experiences depending what you're looking for when it comes to visiting Greenland. Now, a visit through the Northwest Passage. So this, I think, as a Canadian, is almost like a right that we all need to explore this part of our own backyard once in our life if we're able to. And we are one of the only companies that makes the attempt to go all the way through the Northwest Passage. And what's neat is the first time that we had Roald Amundsen in 2019, we were actually able to take her all the way through the Northwest Passage. And I think there's just some magic there with, Roald Amundsen, the explorer, being able to fully transit it, and then having our ship, the MS Roald Amundsen, go all the way through on her inaugural year was really a special moment. Awesome. Yeah. But I mean, imagine being able to go somewhere like this is Fort Ross, for example, being able to see one of the last Hudson's Bay trading posts. This one was actually back in 1937. We might also do a landing on Beechey Island, where there are some commemorative grave sites set up for members of the past failed Franklin expedition. So there's a lot of polar heritage and exploration history and storytelling that we get from doing the Northwest Passage. I mean, just a stunning place, I think, for us as Canadians, especially, to be able to visit. And this is something, the full Northwest Passage, we can only attempt to do it once per year. So this happens around the mid to late August timeframe, because we have to wait until the end of the summer with the hopes that the sea ice has receded enough for us to do the transit through. So you can imagine it's a once in a year itinerary, and this particular one usually sells out about a year in advance.
Wow, I was going to ask that. Yeah, so it sells out. That's interesting.
Yes, yeah. So then, getting to one of our last destinations, Alaska, and you're probably thinking, okay, well, there's tons of cruise lines that go to Alaska. How do you do it differently? And I like to say we put the wild back into the wild frontier of going to Alaska, the wild back into the wilderness. Because as you can see here, one of our guests standing in a kind of bay area in Endicott Arm, there is no other big ship or passengers in sight. We don't actually visit Ketchikan, Juneau, or Skagway. Those are the typical major ports that you'll see on the larger cruise lines. We go to places like Wrangell, for example, which as a town might have just one major street with a couple shops, but there's also some Inuit heritage there from the Tlingit culture. So we might go and view, go for a hike in the forest near the area where we bring our guests ashore and view the totem poles. There's also some hieroglyphics and petroglyphs carved into the rocks ashore. Or it might be sailing around the Aleutian Islands where none of the large ships actually go, and going to uninhabited islands like St. Matthew, for example. They always say it's the island that man could never conquer, and experiencing kind of the barren, in the middle of nowhere landscape, before we finish off in Nome, Alaska. So we get you quite far north as well. And even when we're doing the Southeast Alaska area, we try to work in 3 different ice experiences as well. And what's neat about that is if conditions are in our favor, we get you down in our explorer boats so that we can get up close to the glaciers, something very different from the large ship experience. Most of the large ship experiences will offer you 1, maybe 2 ice experiences in a 7-day time frame. And, they'll bring their ship as close as they can and spin it around to make sure everybody has access from all views. But I love the idea of, again, getting into the explorer boats, getting water level, and being up close and personal, with the glaciers and the ice areas and the fjords, which is very, very cool.
A majestic view.
It's just stunning. And again, that's, I think, what we all think of when we think Alaska. And that's really the type of experience that we bring home when doing it with Hurtigruten. And then to finish off, of course, the 7th continent, Antarctica. It is the coldest, windiest, highest, driest continent on Earth. I mean, if that doesn't sell it, I don't know what does. But don't worry, we, of course, sail there in the Antarctic summer. And the temperatures average between -5 and 5 degrees, which I think for us Canadians, that's like a stiff breeze. I mean, no problem. Exactly. So we do anywhere from 12 up to 23-day itineraries, just depending if you want to include Antarctica and going to maybe the Falkland Islands and South Georgia, which is a sub-Antarctic island, and one of the only places we can guarantee the sighting of the king penguins. So I always say, after my trip to Antarctica, I never realized I needed a penguin bucket list until I had been to Antarctica. There is the opportunity to see anywhere from about 6 to 8 different types of penguin species when you're down there. And there's only, I think, there's 17, 18 in the world. So, I mean, do one trip down there, you've already covered almost half of the penguin bucket list. Yes. If there's any motivation to get yourself down there. But it really is such a special place and a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be able to go down to Antarctica, and somewhere I just now having had the opportunity, somebody had once told me, once you go down to Antarctica, you will never know how to properly explain it. And I completely understand what they mean now, because it really just does. It takes your breath away. It leaves you speechless. It's just such a special place in the world. And please, if you don't already have it on your list, put it on there, because I promise you, you won't regret it. But I'm going to finish off, because I've taken more than enough of your time today, with a video. So just give me a couple minutes here to just switch this over.
That is cool.
I always love that one. It makes me miss travel so much.
I'm definitely missing it right now. That's for sure. So I'm just going to put up my, wow, what a great overview of Hurtigruten's product, that they take you up and personal to those vast lands that got such beauty, serenity, and something you wouldn't see on a normal trip. And that's definitely what travel should be, an experience. It should empower you and impact you, and that's what it can do. So thank you so very much, Kristin, to give us that view of what products you do and how you look after everybody, and how we can be educated, impacted, and just absolutely amazing. And thank you so very much for coming and being with us today. So we really appreciate
My pleasure.
Yeah.
It's my favorite thing to do, just to talk about these amazing places and the wonderful product we have. And again, it's just meant to inspire, and get us psyched and prepared for when we can go back out and experience this all.
Yeah, and that's what we need, is that we know that travel will come again. Maybe we can't do it now, but let's start thinking of places that maybe you've never thought of going before, that can really make an impact, and travel should be an experience. And being able to see these places that you wouldn't normally see, I think a lot of people have put it on their lists, and if they're going to make their travel wish lists become big, and it's not just going to be a short vacation, but it's going to be a vacation that really empowers them. So thanks again for joining us today. I really appreciate that. Thanks, everybody. And if everybody that has joined us, thank you very much. And people that are going to preview it afterwards, we thank you. And if you want any more information, please sign up and give me your email in the Real Talk Travel, and or you can send me an email at susan@grouptravelbysusan.com, and we'll let you know what's the upcoming travel adventures will be. So maybe there's something that you want to know about a little bit more than others. Everybody be safe, stay healthy, keep smiling, and thanks again for having join us today, Kristin. And we'll talk to you again, and join us next next Tuesday for our new adventure that's awaiting. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.